Hello, hello, everyone. Welcome to season 1, episode 2 of the First Mind Podcast. We have one of my favorite humans on here, Mr. David Peake, who
Thank you.
is,
Thank you.
well renowned in the school counseling world, but also a very dear friend of mine. We actually matriculated through our master's program together. So
hmm
we studied school counseling together and then went on to work for a short amount of time in the same district as school counselors.
Yeah.
Got our initial start in the field um, in a very interesting place. And
We did. A great place, though. Always in debt to it.
yes, and we
Yeah.
have had quite a career. I mean, it's a span of probably almost 20 years that we've
Going on,
been
yeah.
doing this. So,
Mhm.
lots of experience and expertise on this call today. So, I'm going to let David introduce himself more, appropriately, tell you some of his background and his accolades. David, if you want to go ahead and start.
Okay. Thank you, Monica. First, thank you for having me. If you are listening to this podcast, if you're watching this podcast, please continue to do so because Monica is such a great mind. Such a great spirit, a free spirit, a free thinker, and just a person that you want to listen to. I don't always agree with her. She doesn't always agree with me, but she always brings something fresh. So, thank you for who you are in my life and who you are to this community. So, I am David Peake. I am a school counselor. I work in a district in Ohio. That's what I'll say. Um, this is my 18th year as a school counselor. I was a school counselor for 9 years in one district, and this is my ninth year in another district. So I've been in a couple environments. I've also worked with only ninth graders. I've worked with grades 6, 7, and 8. I've worked with grades 9 through 12. So um, that's really the breadth of my experience with regard to age. I've also worked in a very diverse community for my entire career. So I've seen a lot. Um, I don't I don't claim accolades, but if there's something that I've been able to do that I'm proud of, that's just sustain in this field as a black man in school counseling. Because I think when we think of counselor, we think more of someone in a nurturing role, and we don't typically assume men to be in those roles. And I think our society, our communities don't assume black men to be in the role of nurturer. So I'm proud to have been able to sustain for this time in this role. I'm very blessed to be able to do what I do. Yeah.
I think that was an amazing introduction. And just to kind of piggyback off of what you said, a black male counselor is like a unicorn. So the expertise
Mm.
that you are about to get on this podcast episode in relation to children and schools and students, if you have them in your lives, is really going to be phenomenal, because there are just not a lot of black male educators. I actually was looking up the stats as you were talking. So overall, 74.3% of all teachers are women.
Mm.
Only 25% are men. And 68.8% are white. So the field is majorly and largely white women. And so, yes, to have a black male counselor in any district is truly unheard of, really.
And you know what? I was actually having a conversation with someone yesterday, a black man. He's about 35, and I was encouraging him to consider school counseling. I mean, I think it really is, for me, it feels like a divine assignment, but it really is it's an amazing opportunity to connect with people um, and make a pretty decent living. You know, my wage is pretty good. But more than that, I'm rich with relationships. Rich with relationships. I have so many great relationships. Even recently, as recently as 3 weeks ago, I was able to be the father figure for one of my former students and walk her down the aisle and give her away at her wedding. And
Oh,
that's not something that, I don't have children of my own, so that's something that's really special to me. But to be able to have these relationships with this young woman I've known since she was 12, and watching her at the homecoming dance to now walking her down the aisle at 26 is just, I feel so blessed to do what I do. So, yeah. And Monica, thank you for helping me to get here. We don't have time to tell the story of how Monica changed my life in our program and helped me to graduate an entire year early, but just know that she did that, and I'm always in debt to you for that. So, but y'all want to hear that.
he
We got to get
always
into
says
the meat
that.
of it tonight.
David always says that, and I am thankful and grateful, and I receive it. But we were two, again, Black students in a predominantly white um, school counseling program with all white educators, and our relationship, I think, was really reciprocal in terms of
Mm,
saving one another and getting through that program. So I thank you and I receive it, but we really helped each other get through that program. So something that you said that I do want to highlight, though, is that livable wage part, because I do think that there is a little bit of a misconception about pay. Um, and that is what a lot of people will say the reason why Black men don't go into the field is because the pay is not good. And what I will say is, the pay should be more. Teachers should absolutely get more than they do. But the way the scale works is, if you have a master's, and you have to have a master's degree in order to be a school counselor,
mm-hmm.
then you start at a higher wage than a
Right.
teacher, a first year teacher who has a bachelor's degree. So you do
Mm-hmm.
actually start at a little bit of a higher pay, and then every year that scale, you increase your pay as you stay in the field. So
You do.
um I just wanted to speak to that, to encourage anybody who's maybe thinking about going into school counseling, specifically, that you can, make a livable wage in that profession. But
Monica,
yes.
I make more than 2.5 times what my salary was my first year. Like that's significant. There aren't a lot of jobs where your salary can double and then nearly double again. Like that's so that's it's a good living. It's a good
Do you
living.
feel like, and this was not part of the podcast, but
No.
I'm glad we're talking about it, because I am in a space now where I am realizing that if healing, coaching, therapy, any of that is your calling, if you feel like in your soul you have a testimony, a story, like, let's get activated. Let's get as many
Mm.
people in the world sharing and talking and helping, because we need it. So
The
I,
world needs it. The world
yes,
needs you.
we really do. So
The world needs
I
you.
don't look at this as something we're doing competitively. Like,
Hmm.
let's get activated. We need all the help we can get.
We
So
do.
if you are interested in school counseling and don't know where to start, feel free to email us after this episode, and we can help guide you through that process and maybe give you some advice on how to start, where to start.
Hmm.
So yes, definitely a livable wage. Something else that you mentioned, the sustained relationships. I
Hmm.
mean, I'm not in education anymore. I retired 2 years ago early from the education field and started my own consulting business. But I have students who I talk to every day. And that is amazing. And I think having somebody come back around from when you had them as a 12-year-old to now being
Mm-hmm.
an adult woman who's getting married and they want you to walk them down the aisle, I think that speaks to the type of person that you are and the type of impact you are having in your students' lives. That's huge. I don't think everybody experiences those sustained relationships. So I did want to just mention that that says a lot about you and your character.
Well, I like to hope that I'm a reflection of the students that I work with. So I think it's definitely uh, just this mutual appreciation. Yeah.
And so we are so far off track, but I'm going to reel us back in. I can tell already that
Yeah.
this episode is probably going to go a little longer than an hour, but we're going to try to keep it, to 60 minutes. So the first thing, David, that I wanted to talk about is I think a good intro into a conversation about school and about students and parents is for us to talk a little bit about the kind of students that we were when we were young.
Okay.
I think that's a good introduction, because the reason why I'm wanting to talk about that is I truly feel that my experience has been, when I work with parents, a lot of what their experience was in terms of what school was for them informs how they react and respond when they have to engage in a school setting for their child. So if school was not a safe space, if school was a negative experience, I find that those parents struggle a little bit more than people who maybe had a more positive school experience. And I want to address that and talk about that, and just provide space for people who did not
Hmm.
feel like school was a safe place for them. So
Hmm.
maybe if you want to talk about your experience, in regards
Yeah.
to your schooling.
Hmm. So I had a really a great pre-K through 8 schooling experience. I went to a private Christian school. The school, Sunshine Christian Academy in Columbus, Ohio, was founded by my godmother, and it was an amazing and affirming school experience. Um, I was with all black students. I didn't have a white classmate until I went to a public school in ninth grade. So it was really a different experience for me. And most people are like surprised when I say that, like, what world were you growing up in? But it was, but when I got to high school, it was different, going into a public school. But I was always a good student. I had a mother that accepted nothing less than my best, or at least close to it. So um, it was never like not performing well in school wasn't optional. And then I also followed the rules. I did the things I was told to do. So it was easy to have me as a student. But for those that did not have a good experience, I try to tell people, um, you want to assume positive intention still when you enter a school and enter into that space, because I am the school. The school is not the walls, the floors, the bathrooms, the hallways. It's the people. The people make up the school. So when you go in, if you're defensive, if you're coming in with negative energy as people, people can feel that, people absorb that, and then it can also make the person that you're engaging with defensive. If it's a teacher, a counselor, an administrator, you want to come in. I don't want to. I have to use the word. You want to come in soft, come in with and assume with positive intentions. The people are there, or at least they initially set out what I would believe to do well. I think they initially set out to educate. That was at least their initial intention. The people that are outside the school, their intention wasn't to come into a school and educate. So if you have people that are like, oh, the school this, the school that, well, why aren't you an educator? Did you say, I want to focus my life and my career on helping students? You didn't say that. So if you're listening to the people that didn't say that, but you think the people that did say that are the enemies. No, they're the ones typically They're the ones that want to help. And if you did not have a good experience growing up, please, for your students' sake, do not project that onto them and to the educators that are entrusted to handle them. Yeah.
I think that's beautifully said. I also feel it is probably easier said than done. So
Oh, for sure.
when I think about my educational career, my first teacher, Mrs. Montgomery, I don't know how I remember. I do know why, but I don't know how I remember that long ago. But my kindergarten teacher was Mrs. Montgomery, and she was a Black woman. I would not have another Black teacher until 6th grade. And that was because at that time, my family transitioned to a different school district. By 7th grade, I was back into a predominantly white space, and I would not have another Black teacher until college. So, yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
Mm.
So, representation matters in my opinion. I think those early years are very key to your development in terms of how you feel about school. So if your K through 5 experience is not a good experience, I think that does inform and shape the rest of your educational career and your feelings about it. But what I will say is on my journey, I was also, especially K through 5, I was a very good student. I followed the rules. I was very fearful of ever being in a principal's office or getting in trouble or anything of that nature. But then probably by middle high school, I was rebellious, and I really started to formulate my own ideas about what society was, what school was. And I was challenging a lot of the things that I was being taught. So I think those later parts of my educational career, high school and then into college, I was a totally different kind of student than I was in the early part. But I do think that early part makes a big, huge impact on how you see the educational process. So shout out to all of those elementary school teachers, because the work that
Mm-hmm.
you are doing is so impactful in terms of how people end up feeling about their schooling. So shout out to you all. And I just want to go back to when I say representation matters, what I mean by that is one of my first mentors in the school counseling profession was a woman. Mary Dolis is her name. And I interviewed her for a school project. I did not have an intention of becoming a school counselor, but I interviewed her for this project that I had in college. And from that conversation, I then decided that I wanted to become a school counselor. But one of the things that she said in this
We
conversation that
never
all
talked about this. I did not know that. That's
yeah, so
interesting.
it
Yeah.
was not my intention to become a school counselor. I was
Wow.
studying psychology. Um, so one of the things that she said in this interview that has always stuck with me is she said, if a white male student comes from a single parent home, and Mary Dolis was a white woman, she said, if a white male student is coming from a single parent home and he comes to school, he may have 5 male teachers in the building who look like him, because if there's male teachers, they're typically white. So he may have at least, let's say 1 or 2, the principal, somebody who looks like him, who he can look up to and maybe develop some sort of father figure feeling or relationship with. For a Black student who's coming from that same environment, it is less likely that he is going to have somebody who looks like him to kind of engage with in a way that would be, fatherly. Not to say that he couldn't do that with somebody who doesn't look like him, but I think
Mm-hmm.
sometimes there is just a comfortability, if you will, in seeing somebody who
Mm-hmm.
looks like you, who comes from the environment you come from. And so she always made a point to say, your school staff representation should really mirror your student population. So if your student population is 40% minority, then your staff population should be 40% minority. But what we know is that often is not the case. So
Mm-hmm.
That has always just been something that has stuck with me. I think having my first teacher be somebody who looked like me, and then to go on and experience just really racism, in no other way to put it, helps me to kind of formulate in my mind an understanding of the humans come in all kinds of shapes, sizes, and thoughts. So I
Yeah.
have had white teachers who have supported me and really helped me thrive throughout my career. I have had black teachers who have done that. I've had black teachers who have, I feel, said things to me that made me not want to, continue in education. I've had white teachers say. So it really is about the people. Um and it's how you feel. So when you're in these situations, I think David brings a good point in that you don't want to project your experience. If you had a negative school experience, I would encourage you to process that and really spend some time thinking about it and healing that part of your life so that you can show up more effectively for your child in
Mm.
their school experience, because it is, it is, like I said, easier said than done, but I think that's important.
That's very important, because I don't want to minimize the challenges that come with having that, you know, beneath your iceberg. Like, when I come into a school, I'm walking in with the experience I had in fourth grade. I'm walking in with that teacher that said something wrong to me in sixth grade. I'm walking in with the teacher that looked the other way when I was being talked about, instead the teacher that laughed at me in ninth grade. Like, I'm walking in with all those things. So I think the word that you said, heal, that is operative. You need to heal from that, just as a human being. And then secondly, like, um, so that you can show up for your student. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think when you heal, you're able to use your discernment better. Because I am
Absolutely.
not gonna sit here and tell you that everybody who goes into education has the intention of helping your child. But
No.
with a clear mind, you can use your own discernment and figure out who are the people in this building who are going to offer a safe space and really help my
Mm-hmm.
child thrive. So, yes, I think it's important to heal from your own experience so that you can neutrally and, not have bias and go in and help your student. I think that's a big part of
Oh,
your child's success. So,
just a little bit so you can see me a little better, maybe. Okay,
all
there we
right.
go. Hmm.
So, the first question that I have, Mr. Peake, is if you could define your role as a school counselor for our audience, what are some things that you are responsible for doing?
So that's a good question. And to simply put it, think of the school counselor as the Swiss Army knife. So the school counselor is kind of the first place you go, because if you don't work in the school, you might not know how to navigate. You might not know what questions to ask. You just don't know what you don't know. So go to the counselor. That's my first interaction typically with parents is, I just don't know what I need. I need an answer. You're the person that I call. So sometimes I'm leading people to other people. Um, but if I'm the person that you're coming to, there could be lots of reasons. It might be that uh, your student or you need some emotional support. Um, there are sometimes, like, life happens. One of the things that you learn as a school counselor is life happens for young people as much as it happens for adults. So I didn't, and I'll give an example here. It's kind of difficult to speak on, but I didn't realize how many young people lose their parents until I became a school counselor. Like, that's at 12, you know, like the things that I've not had to endure at my age, have young people that endure these things. So there are a lot, and that obviously that's a major life circumstance, a life change, but there are any number of emotional uh, happenings with young people that they need support with. So that's one of my roles. It could also be social, just navigating these very social environments, classrooms, interacting with peers, interacting with teachers. Sometimes students need support with that. Uh, Obviously student schedules, that's a big piece, and at my level, at the high school level, it's helping students find out what's next or figure out what's next. What career do I want to pursue? Do I want to go to college? Should I go to college? Because I don't want to, sometimes we assume that that's the path for everybody. We need to stop thinking that way and stop speaking that way. So what's next for me? What should I do after high school? I spend a lot of time working with students um, with those questions, and then a lot of time just supporting student success. So students sometimes are struggling, students sometimes are underperforming. Uh, how do we help get you where you need to be? How do we help position you to be successful? So that's kind of the short of what it is I do as a school counselor. I know it's kind of all over the place, but that's how the day is. If you look at my calendar, it's kind of all over the place. And from one minute to the next, I don't know what's walking in the door. So someone might walk in the door upset, and they want to fight somebody. And then someone might be at the door and they're waiting to see me, and I can see they have a tissue and they've been crying. And so, as a school counselor, as the Swiss Army knife, I need to be able to adjust, um, and show up for students and families in many different ways. Yeah.
Thank you. And you, I feel like, are being very humble and put on the spot, but I'm going to just highlight some of the bigger things that I have observed you do in your career, such as put on a whole day of workshops for young Black male students. I'm taking it back to earlier phases of our career, but I remember you. I mean, if you want to talk a little bit about what that was and what you did, because that was a huge thing that you orchestrated within the
Mhm.
community.
So, and I'm still fortunately able to do those things. I was literally emailing someone that we both know this afternoon to see if they have input. But I'm not a classroom teacher, but I believe the thing that I want, and this is one of the reasons I went into school counseling, is I love helping someone reach that aha moment where you're like, oh, I get it. That makes sense. Now I can change my path. Uh, so Dr. King, he delivered a speech entitled "A Drum Major for Justice." And at the end of the speech, he says, if I can help somebody as I pass along, if I can cheer someone with a word or a song, if I can show someone he's traveling wrong, then my living will not be in vain. And then he goes on to say, if I can do my duties as a Christian, or if I can bring salvation to a world once wrought, if I can teach the message as the master taught, then my living will not be in vain. And for me, it's that, like, how do I show you that you were going this way, but you need to go this way? In that moment that you realize and you internalize, that's why that's happening. Or this is what I need to change. Or I'm empowered. I actually can change it. Or I've been taught this for all these years, but that's actually not the truth. Using one of the conferences as an example, one of the conferences was entitled um, Math Isn't My Thing. So the t-shirt had the NT crossed out. Because I heard so many black boys say, the math ain't my thing. Math ain't my thing. What do you mean it's not your thing? It's African. How is that not your thing? Let's talk about it. Let's look at the history of math. Let's look at the history of math in Africa. Let's look at the Rhiine papyrus. Let's look at the Moscow papyrus. In the Black Panther, in the opening scene, when he's showing these artifacts that are in another country, these African artifacts, that's real. The Moscow papyrus isn't from Moscow, that's from Africa. But they have it in Moscow now, so it's called the Moscow papyrus. They weren't using, they weren't like they weren't using hieroglyphs and like it makes no sense. We've been taught certain things, so I want to help students understand, even within this educational environment, some of the things that you think and not necessarily are told, but you see certain things and they suggest to you. They're suggestive. If I see mostly white students in the accelerated math class, it's suggestive that math is their thing. That's what that
That's such a
suggests.
yeah,
No one's
that's
going to
such
tell me that,
right.
but I'm inculcated over years and time. And oh, I see those kids are pulled out for the enrichment in fourth grade and in the fifth grade. And in sixth grade, they go to a different classroom. And by ninth grade, they're on a whole different track. So I've been told every day after day after day after day after day after day, that's their thing. So I'm sitting with the 10th grader who says math ain't my thing. You a lie. What do you mean math ain't your thing? So those are some of the experiences that I try to provide for students, and that's really some of my favorite work. It's not a part of my role as a school counselor, but it's what I am really passionate about. And when I came to the district that I'm at now, I was already employed somewhere else, and I sat at their table and I said to them, I do a lot of work with Black males. If there's not room for that here, you don't want to hire me. And I just told, because I don't want to get here and then you're like, well, nah, we had other ideas. This is who I am. This is what I do. If you don't like it, you don't have to hire me. Y'all already interviewed 10 other people. I'm the last one. So, and that's literally what happened. So, like, it's a passion of mine. And I feel like it's an assignment for me. Yeah.
Um, so I love when we get to that juncture in our career and our professional life where we can be like, you can hire me or not. Like, this is who I am, and you can take it or leave it. Like, that's my favorite place to be in,
I'm
because
going to be okay.
in the early parts, that's not what it felt like for me.
No,
I
not at all.
I I would have worked anywhere, done anything. What I will tell you is the school counseling profession is not an easy one to inundate. School
Mm-mm.
counselors tend to stay until retirement age. So, you have a lot of different programs graduating, let's say 20 students, 30 students a year. And then you may have within that school year 8 positions. And that's a lot, really, that come available. So it's not the easiest, you know, career to get into. So in that earlier part, I was not as selective, but I love when you establish yourself and you get to a place in your career where you can say, this is who I am, take it or leave it. So much of what you said is absolutely so important. um I spent a lot of time on my professional journey just wanting to tell like, no, you're acting like this because you didn't have a dad at home. And I remember there was a social worker who said, you like, people have to get it on their own. Like,
Mm.
you have to have your own aha moment. Like, I can tell you from the outside looking in, from all my years of experience, and I've learned this with my own children, I can tell you what it is because I've gone through the journey, or I've experienced it, or I think I know, but really, the ability to get another human to arrive at their own aha moment is life changing. Because
It
it's
is.
because now it's intrinsic. It's not coming from somebody else. You feel it in your soul. Like, so that is what helps you make a change. So that's a huge part of this job and of this career. So you kind of already started to get into what our next question is, which is how mental health shows up in school settings, for students, for teachers? Like, how does that kind of play out? And then how is that addressed in
Mhm.
schools?
Yeah. So schools are very interesting in that you have a literally a microcosm of society
Mhm.
because it's a part of our formative years. We all kind of have this schooling experience. We go through this vehicle, um, and particularly at a school, the schools like the ones that I've been blessed to work in, you really have very um, diverse groupings of people, and with that, you see all the entire range of mental health challenges. Um, and because it's such a social environment, most mental health challenges show up in schools because it requires so much mental engagement. When you go to a mall, mental health challenges don't show up as much because everyone's just kind of there doing their thing. You don't have to really engage so much with other people, right? So you you're not challenged. You don't need to demonstrate health, mental health. Um, you don't need to. So mental dis-ease is not something that's going to show up really in certain environments because you don't really need to demonstrate how healthy you are mentally. But schools, you need to because there's so many different people. There's so many different things to navigate and so many different dynamics in this one setting. So it's a place that really where mental health challenges kind of raise. Um, Partly because there are social challenges to navigate. There are also academic challenges to navigate as well. And when those challenges become difficult, uh, people respond in different ways. And that's when you see if you have people that are mentally, I want to say, unhealthy.
For
So
sure.
it does show up, and it shows up as disengagement. It shows up as um, as anxiety. It shows up as lashing out. It shows up as violence. It shows up in many different ways, and for adults as well. As a school counselor, I mean, there are adults that come in my office and have moments, and I have tears from adults as well, because we're all just people. The adults in the building are just older versions of kids. They just kept waking up every day.
Amen to that.
We just kept waking up every day.
I
So,
love the example you gave of the mall versus the school, because I even would go as far to say the classroom to the counselor's office is a totally different
oh
space.
yeah,
I mean, because
oh yeah,
in the classroom, when there's academic expectations, yes, it will look very different than when you're in the privacy of what is our office and now
hmm
have a safe space where you can express yourself. So sometimes it can become where teachers are saying, I see this behavior. And I'm like, I don't ever see that. But the reason why
hmm
I never see it is because my
right.
office is a safe space. Like I'm not asking you to do, calculus in the school counselor's office. Like this is a
Mhm.
different environment. So I think, that was a really good way to kind of point out the difference
Mhm.
in terms of engagement.
And I would add to that, we have full dictation of what happens in our offices. So my office, I don't even use the lights overhead. They're just bright and like, it's too much. So I have a dimmer light, I have a lamp. There's a record player. You can put on a record. There's tissues. There's lotion. You ashy. You represent Mr. P. You one of Mr. P's kids. Put some lotion. Like, there's Q-tips. What you need? You know what? Let's relax a moment. Have
Deodorant. There's
cotton pads
deodorant.
here. We're going deodorant. I'm gonna put some essential oil on this pad and just inhale that for a minute. Like, let's just kind of
Yes.
get you get you centered. That's what a safe space can feel like. The classroom, as a teacher, how can you have a safe space when you have 25 different people that came in? It's hard for you to dictate the energy. I mean, you can do your best as a teacher, but that's not a safe space. There are 25 other humans in this room, not all of which have the best intention for you.
Right.
So in those spaces, just imagine going into spaces that are not safe and you have 7 of those to go in today, and you have to go in each one of them for 50 minutes.
And you said something earlier that I think is so important, that I always try to explain to parents and teachers. You said these, kids are going through the same things that adults are going through, and we don't see it that way. Like, I think there's just this assumption sometimes that the kids, they're so resilient. They're so young. Like, as if those things in and of themselves help protect you from you're having a loss, having
Mm.
your parents not in your home, having a breakup, having a transition from one school to another school. Like, your youth does not protect you from the hard things of life. In fact, I would go as far to say, as an adult, I have developed over time more experience, more coping skills and
Hmm.
mechanisms to deal with life than somebody who is 12 and 13. So if anything, students need more support in terms of their mental health than adults do. And I don't think we always understand that.
And you know what you have more than students? You have more agency.
For
You make
sure.
decisions.
Yes.
So I was thinking about this in preparation. I was thinking about how we say, to be a kid again, like, oh, I didn't have to pay any bills. You didn't have to pay. Well, there are some students that are concerned with that. But think about the kid who doesn't even have agency to ensure that bills are paid. So I can go to work. This is a 14-year-old that can't make sure that that the mortgage is paid, that can't make sure their little sister is picked up from school, that can't like not only do you have challenges, but your ability to mediate different situations is is decreased. Like, you don't have the same ability that adults have. So that can be very even scary.
For
Yeah.
sure. For
You
sure.
can't go and you can't go file for bankruptcy. You can't go file for unemployment. You can't file for unemployment. What do you do? What is your recourse if your family's needs aren't met?
Such a good point. And when you were saying that, I was thinking of just something so simple as going to the bathroom. Like, as an
You're
adult,
right.
I can, one of the things in my later life that I was a bedwetter until I was 13. And as in our community, nobody talks about how that might be anxiety or anything. Like, it's just like, really, you're just punished and shamed because you're wet in the bed till you're 13. But now in my adult life, and really only because I've had an opportunity to take a pause and really sit still and get in tune with my body, what I realize is, when I'm anxious, I have to pee like 5 times. But as an
Hmm.
adult, I can just go to the bathroom. Like, as a
Mm-hmm.
student, you have to ask permission to go to the bathroom. And a lot of times, I think, we feel like students are manipulating bathroom policies, but if you have anxiety, you have to pee a lot. Like, I have to pee a lot. So,
Mm-hmm.
just something as simple as even just trying to go to the bathroom when you want to go to the
Yeah.
bathroom is, you don't have control over that. Um, I think, one of the school districts that I worked in my end of my career, my last school district, um, was a kind of mix. It was a 40% minority. I'm saying this to say I have worked with all different cultures. I pride myself on my ability to build relationships with students from any background. And the reason for that is because I'm always a curious learner. So, if I have a student who comes to me from Asia or Russia or, Mexico, a Native American student, I seek to understand, like, I want to learn about your culture. So I'll bring you in my office and, I want to hear about your traditions and things like that. So I've always had an ability to connect with any kind of student. But one thing that I will say is, it has been my experience, and maybe you can speak to yours, some of our mental health issues show up different culturally too.
Mm.
And if you are not a person who is naturally curious about those differences, I think sometimes certain behaviors are punished and shamed and other behaviors are coddled, when really it's all the same, source of.
Mm.
So anxiety, for example, in some cultures, it is not acceptable to have anxiety. Not only is it not acceptable within your family, but your environment doesn't really dictate you being able to have a whole lot of anxiety. Like,
Mm-hmm.
you have to at least pretend that
Right.
are confident at all times, because if you have a moment of weakness, that could be taken advantage of. So what I would see a lot of times in school situations is, I would have students who would show up in a more defiant way, but really it was just anxiety. And
Mm.
when I would be able to sit down and de-escalate and unpack it, we could get to that. But a lot of times that isn't always, there's not time for that. Sometimes that's just not the course of action that people take. And so that behavior gets punished. Whereas other
Mm.
students may show up anxiously and get into a fetal position. I've had that. I've had students who literally are in a ball under my desk crying. That behavior tends to get a more nurturing response. So I think that, is something that we all need to kind of think about too, that a lot of what our kids are going through, especially when it comes to acting out behaviors. I remember I had a young male student say to me, I used to cry about my parents' divorce, but I learned that as a boy, if I were to cry, people make fun of me, like they laugh at me. He said, so now when I'm in pain or I'm worried or I'm concerned, I just act bad. Like, I just act out. And like, for him to be able at 12 to say that, to
Mm-hmm.
have that awareness is huge. So
Mm.
um I'm saying all that to say, our our young people, they need as much support, if not more. The same anxieties, pressures, like when we went through COVID, like, that was scary for everybody. And I think this,
Mm-hmm.
feeling of like, well, the kids will be okay, but the kids were not. They were not okay. So I think a huge part of the school counselor's role is a lot of managing the mental health part.
Mm-hmm.
Whether you're in a district that, you know, kind of supports that, because not all districts support counselors doing counseling. A lot of districts, they want you to do schedules, they want you to do educational planning, but counseling is not, I've had administrators who, they do not want you to have students in your office talking about their life story. They feel like that is a distraction from them, getting their
Mm-hmm.
education. I don't see it that way. I've always felt a child who does not feel right cannot think right. That's always been my motto, but that is not always the case. What is it for you in your district? is there support for you in helping address mental health issues and actually doing counseling work, or is it more, we just gotta move on and get them back
Wow.
to the classroom?
So before I go there, I do want to back up to kind of exemplify something you're speaking about. If a student says they're not coming to school, the parent calls us. Well, he said he's not coming. I can't get him to come. What we don't do is assign the student detentions. What we don't do is suspend the student. We think, how can we support the student? How can we get you to come to school? Now, a student of a different culture might not have the option to just not go because the parent is like, no, you gonna go to school, right? But they might have the same feelings as a student that said they're not going to go. And because that student's parent would not allow them to stay, instead of not going to school, they skip class. The response to coming to school but not going in the classroom is punitive. And I'm not saying that it shouldn't be, but the response is punitive. You're being delinquent because you're not going to class. But your counterpart, maybe of a different culture, is not going to school altogether, and there's no consequence. So we're looking at the same issue showing up in two different ways and getting different responses. So that's just kind of something to think about, how it can show up in different ways, and educators respond to it differently. But to speak to my ability to be a counselor, where I'm at, I have some ability. I don't have as much as I'd like. I think the demands of the school counseling job are great because when you're the Swiss Army knife, if one of your sometimes people don't know what you do and assume that you should be busy moving some paper or doing something quantitative. How can we measure what you're doing right now? And when you go to a counselor outside of a school, there aren't necessarily quantitative metrics. And it's expected that you're going to have conversation. That's the work. But I think people assume when school counselors are sitting and having conversation, dialogue, helping a student reach that aha moment, that is leisure when it's actually work. If you go to a counselor outside of a school, you'd expect them to do exactly what you see that school counselor doing with that student. And if they weren't doing that, what kind of counselor are you? Aren't you supposed to talk? But in school, it's if you're talking, well, what kind of counselor are you? Aren't you supposed to be doing paper? Aren't you supposed to be doing other things? Like,
That
wait a
was a
minute.
very, very frustrating part of the career and profession for me because my gift is truly as a counselor. So the paper stuff and scheduling, I never had an affinity, really never had an interest, honestly, in doing that work. It was a part of my job. And um, it really depends, I think, on who your administrator is because that sets the tone for the building, their expectations of what you're doing. I fortunately have worked with many administrators who um, utilize me for what my gift is, so that was a blessing. But yes, I agree. There is this idea that if you're actually doing counseling work, you're not working. So it is frustrating. But I think that something you said is a good segue into this next part when we talk about educational plans. But you talked about, the punishment and punitiveness. One of the things that really was the foundation of me even starting this podcast is I just would love to really try to eradicate the shame from all of this. Like the shaming, to me, it is doing the opposite of whatever we think it's supposed to be doing. Like the punishing, I'm not saying that there shouldn't be consequences for behavior. There absolutely should be boundaries, consequences. But I think you can give boundaries and consequences without having to make people feel bad about themselves. So the shame and the punitiveness and you're not a good person because you're in the bathroom hiding during math class, when really it's about your anxiety about performing in that classroom, is just counterproductive to me, to you getting to a space where you feel comfortable enough to go back into the classroom. So that is my philosophy for all of the journey in terms of healing. Like, let's get the shame out of it, because it has no place. Like, it just isn't useful. It isn't helpful. How can we help to guide young people without shaming them is a huge, because why do we need to do that?
Oh, wow. So
But we got to go into the next part, which is educational plans, 504s and IEPs, because what I do know about educational plans is that some people will not pursue educational plans that their child or student really needs out of shame. Like, there is this, I don't want them to be labeled. I don't want them to be tracked. I don't want them. So a lot of times we're not getting our students the help they need because there is this shame and this feeling of, if I put them on this educational plan, then that somehow means that they are not smart, that they, are not a good student. So again, the shame, it just is, to me, counterproductive to the goal, which is to feel better so that you can think better.
okay, so I want you all to listen closely to what I'm about to say. What Monica just said was a tease. You're going to come back to the next pod to talk about IEPs and 504s, because I'm going to bring a great school psychologist that you're all going to love. You'll need to tune in. Who's a friend of mine, and I really just love. He's been doing this for many years. Has trained other school psychologists, and I really love the way that he explains really the difference between what is a 504 accommodation plan and what is an IEP. So you're going to have to tune into the next one. I don't want to say his name because I'll let him introduce himself. But you need to tune in to listen to that conversation. Many students need support for different reasons. And there are different ways to deliver that support. And it might be through a 504 accommodation plan. It might be through an IEP. I have things to say about it, but I don't want to open it up right now. You have to tune in to the next podcast. I want to bring a great friend. He's also funny. I think I'm a nice guy. I think he's nicer than I am, but he's real cool. So I can't wait because you haven't
So
met him
I'm
yet.
excited. I'm excited for that because I have no idea who or what you're talking
Yeah, I
about.
know you.
But
I
I'm
know you haven't met
excited.
him yet.
But I do want to at least tell the audience the
Uh-huh.
difference. So
Okay.
I can at least say a 504 plan is a plan that is designed to address any sort of mental health or health issues. So maybe you have a student who is diabetic. Maybe you have a student who actually has a diagnosis of anxiety or depression. Any kind of health related, and that includes mental health, diagnosis or concern can be addressed through a 504 plan. An IEP is an educational service plan that addresses cognitive issues. So issues with your learning. So maybe you're dyslexic, maybe you have a reading disability. Then IEP is going to address the academic cognitive issues and concerns. So they're two different things. 504s come out of the Civil Rights Department. because what was determined is that if I have, this diagnosis of I'm diabetic, or if I have anxiety, I should still be able to access the curriculum to the same degree that a student who does not have those barriers in their life. And an IEP, kind of the same thing, but just comes out of the Department of Education, not civil rights, but is saying that if I have a learning disability, I should still have supports that help me access the curriculum. So that helps to give at least a little bit of information about what those two plans are.
And the IEP can be behavioral as well. So
Yes.
like, or emotional. So maybe you have, some disabilities or challenges related to your emotions, behaviors. So you can have an IEP for that. But the 504 accommodation plan is to accommodate a challenge, an issue, so that you can access. The person I'm going to bring on maybe I've heard him describe it as an accommodation plan might be because the student is the student is in a wheelchair. So the class that you need to go to is on the second floor. On your accommodation plan, you have access to the elevator so you can go to the second floor and access that classroom. That's an accommodation for really a physical disability. But you don't need specialized education. You just need an accommodation so that you can access.
Yes.
The IEP is the individualized education plan because you need specialized education, hence special education. The 504 accommodation plan is not special education. It's simply to accommodate a need.
Yes.
So I don't want to steal his thunder. So so you
But
have to
thank
wait.
you. No,
You
I
have
think
to
that's
tune in. Y'all
important.
have to tune in. Please
I love a
tune in.
plug. I love a good plug for
Yeah.
an upcoming episode.
Yeah.
But what I will say, without, going too deeply into educational plans, is that if your child needs support, I highly encourage you to get them support. And
Oh,
I would really like to normalize, you know, us allowing the school to support our students, because that's what your tax money is going to. Like, that's why you are attending the school that you're at. Like, so I think some of the concerns that people have, and maybe you can answer, is this plan going to stay with them for life? Is it like going to prevent them from being able to access opportunities in the future? That's some of the concern that people have when they are looking at educational plans, and I think why they don't do that. So maybe you can speak to.
yeah. So both 504 504 accommodation plans and IEPs or individualized education plans. Uh, they're they are legal documents, and they have to be adhered to uh, by by at least all public schools. And they're documents that you can take with you to college. So at the collegiate level, they do honor 504 plans and individualized education plans. However, when you leave the school, that plan does not go with you. If you take it to the university and say, hey, this is the plan that I have, they will likely honor it. And much of the time, they'll decide what they will and won't honor. But it's not something that um, goes with you anywhere else. So I work with and amongst people that may have had 504 plans or IEPs in school. I have no way of knowing. There is no record at your place of employment. It does not show up on a resume. Um, so it's not something that really marks you as you go through life. But I think we're starting to turn the tide and helping people understand that it is something that can help you. So if a student has a need, that need should be met The last thing we want to do is have a student with an unmet need because we're worried about someone's perspective or opinion on them having their need met. Like we would never see a hungry child and tell them, don't eat. No, don't eat because people are going to think that you're greedy or people are going to think away. Like the child is hungry, so
That's a good
we are
example.
always going to encourage a hungry child to eat. We're going to provide food. So let's provide accommodations and specialized education for students that need that.
And I'm gonna extend the conversation to something that I know is very controversial, and I really don't have any I have my own opinion, but I absolutely understand that everybody is not of that opinion, and I think you should do whatever feels right in your soul. But I'm also going to say I feel the same way about medication. So when I have a student who is diabetic, we understand that their body is not producing enough insulin, and it never occurs to us to question them getting the insulin that they need. Like, we just know, like, their body doesn't produce enough insulin, so they're taking a medication to help replace what the body isn't able to produce. That is how I see medication. um I do not feel like medication is something that, especially when you're taking it for anxiety or depression or to focus, um I don't think it's always something that you have to take forever. I personally have taken medication at times when my depression was, after I lost my father, I was really struggling with depression. I would not have been able to be productive even in therapy had I not taken medication. Like, I needed
Mhm.
the medication to help at least get my serotonin levels regulated so that I could then go to the therapy and receive the skills that she was trying to give me. So that's the way I see medication. But again, you have to do what feels right for you. I do encourage people to do their research about education, but to be open-minded, because in the same way that David pointed out, you wouldn't deny a hungry child food. If you had a child who needed glasses, like, because the world
Mhm.
is fuzzy, you would get them, if you had the means, you would get them glasses so that they could see the world more clearly. And that, a lot of times, is what medication can do. So
Mhm.
that's my plug on medication. Again, do your research and do what feels good for you and your family.
Absolutely. I agree, and the medication I've seen it be very helpful, very useful for students. And after time, and some students know, okay, well, I need my meds now. I'm able to focus when I take my meds. I'm able to get this done. Um, so why not explore that if it can be of use? Um, yeah, that's what it's for. We have so many advancements in the field of medicine. So if you have something that can help and you know that you can help the young person, help the young person.
Hmm.
Please
And if it's a
get out there.
natural remedy, I'm supportive of natural remedies too. I can say this because I no longer work in education, but plant medicine is helpful for me. And it
Mm,
probably could be helpful to some students, but that's not normalized. That's not something I don't even think it's legal necessary. So there are, things that you can research that are natural, remedies to focus and
mhm.
depression and anxiety. Explore all of it and figure out what works best for you. But I would be open-minded in that, journey, because again, a lot of times what I'm seeing is students are being punished and penalized because they just cannot do what you are asking them to do. Like, they just can't do it. So, um, the shaming is just really making them feel bad about something that they are not able to do. And just kind of adds, I think, to feeling bad about yourself, really. So
Yeah, yeah.
we are
I've seen that a lot.
yeah, we are over the hour, so I am gonna just kind of culminate this conversation with just some last tips, advice, anything you would give to parents students in terms of having a successful school year. When I announced this on Come Hither Energy, I said, this is probably a good time to have this conversation because the honeymoon is over. Because when school starts, when back to school starts, it's all about the fits. You know what I mean? It's all about how you're going to do your hair and
Yeah.
how you're going to show up. And it's fun. You haven't seen some of your friends all summer. Like
Yeah.
it's amazing. And
Yeah.
then,
Even at
we get
stores, it's like, oh, Walmart got packs of paper for 24 cents.
yes,
That's exciting. Like
yes,
getting deals because we like to shop. So, oh, I got some
yes,
deals on
yes,
paper.
all of it.
Like, yeah, all of
And
it.
then that first parent teacher conference. Like, have y'all had conferences already? When are conferences coming up?
We haven't had them yet. They're coming up. Actually, not until the end of October. But yeah, by then we're like, okay, you've been cutting up. Okay, yeah. So there's yeah, the honeymoon. The honeymoon is really over now. People are settling in to the dynamics are starting to lift to the surface. Some of the things that were beneath the surface when the school year began, they're kind of raising to the top. The honeymoons of we haven't had any fights this year. That's over.
Yep, it's
So
over.
that's over. So yeah, we're in it now. We're
One of
in
the
it now.
things I want to tell you as a piece of advice, though, that you may not know. Oftentimes, your school counselor is the last to leave the school year and the first to start the school year. So there's actually time built into our schedule where we are typically back to school 1 to 2 weeks before school starts. And we stay 1 to 2 weeks after school ends. So if you know that you have a child who has anxiety or is going to need some sort of plan or just some extra love in starting the school year, you can actually reach out to your school counselor in the summer before school starts and be able to kind of get a hold of them and start to have some conversation to help make that transition a little more seamless. I just wanted to point that out as a piece of advice. It might not be helpful because we're already well into the school year, but keep that in mind for the next
Right.
year.
Yeah, so don't listen to what she just said. Do not reach out to your school counselor over the summer because if they're like me, they are not
Not
responding to
the
you. You
summer, but
had
like
all year. We are closed. You don't go to Macy's at 11:30 p.m. and like, well, I'm getting it for my kid though. Well, you gotta get even
what
for the
I'm
babies. You need
saying
to
to
do the
you
school year.
is you have a week before school starts and a week after that you might be able to reach that school counselor before they get to the beach. That's all I'm
Okay,
saying.
so because I let me just add this to that. What I found is sometimes parents are thinking that they want to get support for their student, and sometimes their thought is, I'm going to wait till the year is over because then it might, I can maybe get some really one-on-one time with the counselor. The issue is not nothing can really happen because in order to establish a support, there has to be a team meeting and everyone needs to come together. So, like I've had parents reach out when the school year is over, but we can't really do an evaluation because now we don't have the teachers. When it comes to your mind, do it. Don't wait. If you're thinking about it, don't say, "Well, we're going to get through this and then." No, do it now because we're not going to be able to help you. We need the teachers to be a part of the conversation. And if we don't have them, then we have to wait. And so as soon as it comes to your mind, reach out. Even if you feel like it's an inconvenient time for the counselor or the teachers, it doesn't matter. They pay us to be there. So it's never the wrong time to reach out for support,
And
unless it's the
another
summer.
thing I would add is oftentimes I'll hear parents say in huge transitional years or just maybe you moved from one school district to another school district. In the previous school district your child had a educational plan, but parents for some reason will say, well, I'm just going to wait and see how they do. I never understand, because a transition for me as a 45-year-old woman is anxiety provoking. Like, if you move me from one setting that I've been doing, you know, habitually for a whole 365 days, let's say, and then you put me into a whole new setting, I am going to have some struggles, and I'm 45. So this
Mm-hmm.
idea that, I'm just going to wait and see how it goes, or see how things play out with this new set of teachers for a child who will need support, I discourage you from doing that. Wrap them in as much as support as you can in those transitions are
Mm-hmm.
hard for everybody.
Yeah, I agree. Definitely.
Any other
And
advice?
I have students that transition from eighth to ninth, so that like that's a really a pivotal year that we need to be hyper vigilant on what does my child need to be successful in high school. But you're asking, I think, any other advice, and I would just say, as I was saying earlier in the conversation, to assume good intentions. You know, if people show you that their intentions aren't great, then you deal with them accordingly. But you want to assume good intentions, go in with positive energy, and often you'll get that back. That's the one thing that you can control. You can't control uh, the educator most of the time, but you can control the energy that you bring to the situation. So regardless of your schooling experience, just do your best to bring a positive energy, because you are you're the largest part of your students' educational team. You really are. You're the constant. You are the constant. You see them more. You've been with them longer. So you are the greatest part of that team. And you're the quarterback, really. Like, and the team often is going to follow the leadership. So definitely do your best to lead that way.
And I think it's okay, to ask questions.
Yeah,
Ask questions. Like, how are you supposed to know? You've never worked in education a day in your life. How are you supposed to know what a 504 is, or what an IEP is, or
right.
how the schedule works? Like, those are normal questions. We talked a lot about struggling students, but I've also seen it on the other end with students who are gifted, students who need to have a curriculum that is more challenging, and we don't often know how to access those, higher classes. Like, those are things that you should ask questions, feel comfortable to ask those questions, because how would how
Hmm.
to get into honors or AP English if you are, coming from a situation or a family who never had those options or opportunities. So
Hmm.
absolutely never be afraid to ask questions. um one of I am so fortunate that I accidentally ended up as an educator, because again, that was not my intention. Because what I will say is, having that experience and working in those environments really helped formulate how I was able to engage and address issues as they arose from my own children and get them through their educational journeys. So the only reason why I would be able to walk into a meeting at a school and feel confident is because I was armed with information. So ask your questions, research. One of the
Hmm.
things I do, I actually had somebody call, even just today. Um, I work as a parent advocate. So I'm a person who you can actually employ to attend a meeting, an IEP meeting with you, or a 504 meeting with you, or to go to an expulsion hearing or a suspension hearing with you. So there are people in the world who are well versed in the education system who can also support and assist you on that journey if you are not
Hmm.
comfortable. But definitely, the more confident you are, the better you'll be able to show up in those environments and not feel like people are trying to take advantage of you or your student. So that would
Yeah.
be my piece of advice as well.
Hmm. Well, Monica, I want to thank you for having me on for this episode. Um, Hopefully, I'm able to join the next guest, because I do want to be a part of that conversation. But it's really been quite a journey. You've been such a significant part of my journey, and I appreciate you for being that and for being so supportive of me inside education, outside of education. Um, you've been a great friend, so
Oh,
thank
I
you
appreciate that.
for
And you
that.
have been
Yeah.
a great friend to me too. And thank you for being willing to come on and have this conversation. This is not always an easy thing to do, especially when you're still working in education. So I
Yeah.
appreciate you for being, vulnerable and feeling okay enough to do that. I think the conversation we had today is going to help heal and really inform many people. So I'm excited for that. I'm excited for the guests because I have no idea what you're talking about. So I want to talk about that so that we can
Sure.
definitely have another episode in that time frame. If you have questions from this podcast episode, please send them in to us so that we can address them in this future episode that David just plugged, that I don't even know what we're doing, but I'm excited. But yeah, let's continue this conversation. This is an important conversation. Just to give you some information about what's coming down the pike. September 28th marks 5 years to the date of my father's passing. So my next episode, episode 3, will be on grief, and we are going to actually have Dr. Lewis Wallace is going to come back and talk about the stages of grief. And we're just going to have a dialogue and conversation about taking, whatever shame we have in grief and normalizing what that process looks like. So stay tuned. I'm so excited to keep, talking to you all and having these conversations. David, thank you for being a guest. And you'll be
Thank
back. I
you.
hope you'll come back.
Yes, I was on the
You
list.
have
I'll definitely be back.
expertise in so many different facets of life. So I would love to have you back on to have another conversation. So
We'll certainly do. Until next time, thank you, listeners. We'll see you
all
again
right.
soon.
Yep. Bye
All
everybody.
right.
Take care.
Bye now.
Let's heal.